All right, awesome. I see it. So, good evening, everyone. We're officially calling the Council for Minnesotans of African Heritage to order. If we can have our staff member do a roll call, that would be awesome. Linda, Shakira, which one are you all going to do the roll call? You're muted, Linda.
Linda, would you mind doing it for me? My daughter's kind of in the background being loud.
Okay, I can. Hold on for just a second so I can pull that up.
While she's
Okay.
pulling that up, we want to welcome our newest council member. Please pronounce your name for me because I don't want to mispronounce anybody's name.
That's all right. My name is Abdirman Dahir.
Abdirman Dahir.
Yep.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, roll call. Councilperson Hughes.
Present.
Chair. Madam Chair.
Present.
Council Member Doe. Vice Chair Doe.
Present. Present.
Treasurer Alfreda Daniels. Secretary Yolanda Adams Lee. Council Member Mullins. Council Member Crawford.
Present.
Council Member Nandi.
Present.
Council Member Winston.
Present.
Council Member Dukes.
Present.
Council Member Busa. And Council Member Abdirman Dahir.
Present.
Representative Thompson. And Senator Fateh.
All right, that is everybody. So thank you for doing that. Hopefully everybody has had a chance to look at the meeting agenda. So if I can have a motion to adopt the meeting agenda, unless we want to add any items or remove any items.
I move the motion to adopt the meeting agenda.
Is there a second?
Second, Crawford.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. For our consent agenda, we only have two items. One is the approval of the January minutes, and then the other one, we actually decided to move the staff reports under the consent agenda item, and those were all sent out to you in the meeting packet. So if there weren't any corrections, or if there were any staffing reports that anybody wanted pulled, speak now. All right, hearing none, I just need a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
So moved, Doe.
Is there a second?
Second, Dukes.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. We want to introduce our newest member to the team, which is Flakimi, is it Pate? Pate. So she is our coordinator. Oh, maybe we need to have people mute because I'm getting feedback. So she's our outreach coordinator. So Flakimi, if you just want to kind of give just kind of a brief background of who you are, and just kind of the work that you're going to be excited to do with the council, and then we'll move into the rest of the agenda.
Thank you. My name is Flakimi. My background is in DEI, community engagement, community organizing, see some familiar faces. So I will be continuing some of that work that I've done in the past here with communications and community engagement. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you in your respective communities and organizations.
Thank you so much, and we're so excited to have you on board. So Linda officially has a full team. Yay!
I do. And I just want to point out that we elevated this position and we're so excited to have Flakami. So her actual title is Community Engagement and Communications Director. So we're excited, and that tells the emphasis that we are placing on being in the community and then making sure that we are transparent and that the community is engaged and involved in the work that we do. So excited,
Awesome.
really beyond excited to have her.
Yes.
It's been a great. I've been here for a month so far, so it's been really amazing. So looking forward to just continuing that the momentum that we have already.
Thank you so much.
Great to have.
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
No, I was just good to have you on board, Flakami.
Perfect. So if we can move to the financial report, I do not see our council member Daniel. So Shakira, are you in a position to kind of share our financial report? And this is more for our newest council member. When you see the report, you're not really going to see much because we don't do a lot with necessarily programming. This particular agency, you're going to see majority of the dollars will kind of fall up under the salaries. And then we also do some outsourcing for some of our community activities that we're going to be involved in, or professional development for the actual team themselves. So Shakira, if you want to take it away.
Okay. So this month, we don't have any negatives. Nothing's been over encumbered. We haven't had any major contracts come through. The only contract that has come through since the last council meeting was one for Nawe, and that was just, again, that was just because their original contract just went through the calendar year rather than the fiscal. So this is just one that would then take them through the end of our fiscal year, and their previous contract will then be canceled. So then that way we don't have too much money encumbered for them. Other than that, it's just been business as usual with our normal monthly payments and per diems. Any questions?
Perfect. And then the number that we always pretty much look at and monitor is the unobligated. So right now we have $31,090.77. But we also have to keep in mind, this is the first year of, as you all know, we're on a biennium. So we get our allocation, as every, 2 years. And so the dollars that we have right now, if at the end of the fiscal year, which our fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th. So at the end of the fiscal year, if we still have dollars in our unobligated, it can roll over to the next year. Now, the only thing is June 30th, 2023, we should not have any unobligated. It should be down to zero. So that's the only thing, is you can only carry it over the first part of the biennium, the first year of the biennium, but then the second one, the hope is that we would be expended out. The only downside is, and I'm giving again context for our newest member and just kind of reminders, for those of you that, don't recall how our budget works. The other piece to kind of keep in mind too is last year we actually did give money back, but you also have to remember this is year 2 of being in a pandemic. The majority of our dollars would have been used on either outreach activities. So like Day on the Hill is a big expenditure. We did that virtually. The other thing that's usually a big expenditure is our policy summit. That was done virtually. And then we usually participate in, various outreach activities, or even bringing in and hiring photographers to capture, the activities that we're doing. But because we were virtual, that was, those were dollars that were basically not expended out. The other heavy expenditure is normally when we do get to the point where we do meet face to face, we do provide dinner, for our meetings as well. And so you think about it, for a whole 2 years, we haven't provided, food, and that is actually a heavy expenditure. Shakira, if I remember, is it to the tune around roughly what, 10,000 or so?
Yeah, it was around $1,200, or sorry, 12,000. Just because meetings, when we do actually have full council members, and this is going off of when we had 9 members instead of 11. We were spending about $230, $250 per meeting.
So yeah, so when you think about that, that's part of where some of those dollars were, put back. So obviously 12 times 2, we can do the math. so those are just to give you just further context of why we have, unobligated is, starting to creep up on the 31,000. And the other piece that I will add is, you heard me say we're now fully staffed as far as the council is concerned. And knowing that when you look at our budget, and even as you're looking at the MFR report, which stands for the manager's financial report, you're seeing a lot of the dollars in the salary. So we had an open position. So of course, we're not going to be able to, expend those dollars immediately, but eventually we will. So that's where a lot of that excess dollars is coming from as well. Any questions from council members in reference to the financial report? All right, thank you. And then also just a reminder, because it is a report, we don't necessarily vote on, there's not a motion that has to take place as far as the financials, as you would, think through a typical board, if you will. So we are going to move into, I see we have both of our guests here. We're going to move into our presentations, and it looks like we're going to start with Nelima, who is the Executive Director for ACER. And then we're going to follow up Nelima's presentation with Keith Baker with Reconnect Rondo. So Nelima, I'm going to turn this over to you. And I don't know if you need sharing rights, if you had a PowerPoint.
Yes, I do need to share the screen, please.
Okay,
if possible.
Perfect. And welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so can I start? So good evening, council members. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair Hughes. Thank you, Linda. Good to see you again. And thank you so much to the council for inviting us to speak about our work at ACER. My name is Nelima Sitati Munene. I'm the Executive Director of ACER. ACER is the African Career Education and Resources, Inc. We're an issue-based organization, and our mission is to close the inequity gaps that exist within our communities. So let me see if I can do this. Can you all see my screen? Is it shared?
No, we don't see. I don't.
Nope, it's
No. Okay, I'm not sure if I know how to do. If I know how to do this on the.
You're going to want to click on the box with the arrow.
Yes, I did that. And let's see.
Place to share your screen rather than trying to share the individual application.
Okay, let me try it again. Let me try it again and see if this works. Is it shared now?
Nope, we just see you.
Okay, all right. I'm not having a lot of success with sharing the screen, but I'll just go ahead and not waste any more time. I can throw some links in the chat.
Okay.
So ACER is the African Career Education and Resources, Inc. And we are an organization. We have been around for 14 years, and we exist to close the inequity gaps that exist within our communities. Our theory of change is that we believe that, the communities who are most impacted are in the best situation to address the issues that, that they are facing. So organizationally, our work has evolved. We work as a strategic convener. Most of our work is based in the Northwest suburbs, but also work regionally as well throughout the state of Minnesota. We work as an anchor organization and also work to be a bridge builder between community and government systems in order to effect systemic change. Currently, our main 4 buckets of work are in the areas of economic and community development. And in that area, we work to advance culturally based wealth building strategies to build generational wealth and shared ownership models. Civic engagement work is to increase community leadership and participation and to give our communities increased representation and agency, and to advance equitable policies and to engage voters. Our housing justice work exists to promote housing stability, to increase the preservation and production of affordable housing, and to advance tenants' rights, and also advocate for wealth ownership, wealth building strategies through home ownership. In health equity, we work to reduce health disparities in our community and to address the social determinants of health. And so one of our biggest goals is to expand public health initiatives, both locally and regionally as well, within our communities. And so I'll just share some documents here. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is to talk about our work so far. And so I will go ahead and just share also our latest report and walk through that. So one of the biggest buckets of work is health equity. And in health equity, we seek to close the health disparities within our communities, as I said, by addressing the social determinants of health. And it has been, we know we're still in a pandemic or trying to get out of it. And within the last year, ACER has continued to be a CCC, which is a COVID community connector. And with that, we had have a contract with Minnesota Department of Health and are charged with increasing access to, back then it was testing. And right now we've been doing a lot of vaccination clinics. So in 2021, we assisted 538 people throughout the state of Minnesota in, being vaccinated, and we supported 14 vaccine clinics that were, hosted by other organizations. And we hosted as an organization, in addition to the 1429 vaccination clinics throughout the state of Minnesota. And we were able to get in touch with 1,800 people. And so in total, we were able to serve 2,338 folks through vaccination clinics and testing. We also have a federal grant, which is to increase vaccination and immunization throughout the state of Minnesota, and to also to do COVID education throughout the state of Minnesota. And so in that project, we conducted 10 vaccine education events throughout the state. And we supported 4 vaccine education events that with 4 major employers in the state of Minnesota. And in total, we were able to reach 566 individuals. That was in addition to the ones of the vaccination clinics through education events. And also, we were able to reach 720 people who attended a total of all those events. For our housing justice work, we know that whereas the nation has witnessed an unprecedented rise in housing stability, our commitment to making housing stable in our communities continues to remain. And starting in early 2021, we rolled out an emergency rental assistance program. We were a contractor and continue to be a field partner with Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, and we provide navigators and have subcontracted as well with other small organizations, and are charged with conducting outreach and engagement activities. And the goal is to extend technology access and provide navigation services to the most impacted folks in our community. And so in total, in 2021, we conducted 37 outreach events throughout the state of Minnesota to increase access to the program to our community members. We assisted over 700 unique individual applications, for the rent help program. And we were able to be in touch with at least 2,300 people throughout the state of Minnesota and assisting people to access the rent help. In addition to that, we also have an eviction intervention program of that, because due to the pandemic and non-payment of rent, a lot of our community members were faced with the threat of evictions. And so in total, our navigators were able to conduct outreach and prevent and work with 118 individuals, and to prevent those individuals from being evicted from evictions that had been filed in court. A big bucket of our work is advancing tenants' rights. And so we do that through tenant cohorts. And so throughout 2021, we have worked to pass ordinances with two cities, the cities of Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center. And the goal of that is to increase the protection of tenant rights. ACER is also a member of the ARES campaign. We're part of a national coalition, and the goal of the ARES campaign was to increase access, of the rent help program and to monitor how states were implementing the rent help program to make sure that, that there were no barriers to most impacted folks receiving the help they needed. Our economic development work, early on during the pandemic, we did a lot of outreach to micro businesses and also to state agencies in Hennepin County and our local cities to help them to develop programs to funnel funds quickly to our businesses that were impacted. So in 2021, in total, we were able to conduct outreach to 275 businesses we supported with outreach, and we supported at least 59 businesses with grant applications. And we also have what we call the Blue Line engagement. The Blue Line is engagement that we do in anticipation of the Blue Line. And one of our goals is to make sure that our communities are not gentrified and displaced because of the redevelopment. And so we were able to extend grants to 19 businesses along the Blue Line corridor in the northwest suburbs. We also provide grants. We don't do loans yet. We do grants to businesses. And last year we were able to funnel $60,000 to micro businesses in our community. We also provide technical assistance to micro businesses, and last year we served 53 businesses and provided 503 hours of technical assistance services in addition to others. One of our goals is to increase ownership of commercial properties and to provide affordable commercial space to our communities. And so last year, after 3 years of working with the city of Brooklyn Park, we were finally able to assist the city and convince the city, and did a lot of advocacy to acquire a $7.3 million purchase of the Northwind Plaza for redevelopment and to create a new business center in the Northwind Plaza that will be able to provide some incubation space for micro businesses of color. We're also working with the Ignite Business Women Investment Group, which is a cooperative made up of 27 Black women who are micro business owners, and are assisting them in purchasing a building so that they can own and also have some rental space, and are also working with the City of Brooklyn Center and completed a feasibility study for an entrepreneurship market plaza. Finally, for civic engagement work, our goal is to extend voter registration and voter outreach. We had a series of special elections in the northwest suburb, especially in Brooklyn Park. We were able to reach a total of 2,451 people to talk to them about the special elections and about registering to be voters. We also did a lot of work around post the census. We were part of the Complete Count Committee table. We converted that to the redistricting table. And the goal was to continue to educate our community members around redistricting and the importance of it. And we did a lot of community conversations around that. We engaged our communities to draw some community-centered maps. We brought community members to testify before the legislature and to give public comment. And also were part of the communities of color that submitted comments to the courts and are really waiting for the final maps to be drawn. So that is our work in a nutshell. I did drop the links to both documents in the chat for folks to take the time to look at, and I will look to see if there are any questions at this time for me.
So that was a lot. I mean, it's phenomenal work that you all are doing. And I do know the work of ACER, and they have been a long time partner of North Hennepin Community College. So I probably got introduced to ACER back in 2008, and we've maintained, that partnership. So there is a question from Councilmember Dukes. He said, this is outstanding work. Do you address barriers for those having issues with their immigration status? And then specifically, he's asking around housing and employment.
Thank you for the question. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And I think as an immigrant-led organization, I think a lot of times what happens is that we tend to incorporate all that into our work. Although there are times when we've had like specific campaigns around immigration. For example, during we worked to around the DED issue, which was the deferred and forced departure. That was specific to the Liberian community, and we're still working on that and providing people with increased access. There's still some folks who still need to be able to apply, for their green cards, and we were able to. Congressman Phillips has, led the efforts to extend that deadline, and so that deadline has been extended. We also work on a number. When it comes to housing, a lot. I want to say, I think about 65% of the folks that we work with are immigrants, and they're especially in housing, and that's why we focus a lot on tenants rights, because that is a big issue for immigrants and especially for undocumented people. And so we incorporate a lot of that in our advocacy. When it comes to micro businesses, it is the same story. A lot of folks are immigrants and so face barriers of not having, credit history, and so on and so forth. And finally, I will say right now, we are part of two tables. One is the Decriminalizing Our Communities campaign. And what that centers around is that we realize that there's some things that are unique to immigrants. And so they tend, if somebody does something, they tend to be criminalized. For example, the driver's license issue is a big deal for the immigrant community. And sometimes the people are in between statuses and they cannot access driver's licenses. If they drive, then they get pulled over, then they get criminalized. And so we have people who have a criminal record, and that impacts their life just because they drove without a driver's license, and so that impacts them. The other thing is that the post-conviction, there's a bill that is currently in this session. The post-conviction relief bill is a big deal for immigrants, because having a conviction can impact your immigration status. Even if you're a naturalized citizen, your citizenship can be revoked. And for a long time, when people are coming before the courts and just being asked to take a plea bargain, the prosecutors or the attorneys were not really explaining to them this is how it could impact your immigration status in future. So those are two other things that we're working on. The post-conviction relief bill that is I think is in play this upcoming legislative session, and also the Decriminalizing Our Communities campaign.
So there is a couple questions, and then Vice Chair Doe, I see your hands up. Let me just read this one question. This is actually coming from Councilmember Crawford, who is in Duluth. And he said, thank you for your amazing work. Home ownership and generational wealth is so important to our communities. Are you engaged in work to build home ownership and holistic healthcare?
Yes, so let me start with home ownership. So one of the things we're doing is we're working with the city of Brooklyn Center right now. And like I said, we have this tenant cohorts that we're working with. And one of the main things that we're trying to do is to really support people who are renting right now to convert into home ownership. And for a lot of these folks, and we're working with people who are very low wealth, folks. So on the one hand, they're very low wealth. And so it's very difficult for them to qualify for a mortgage and etc. And we're partnering with PRG, who do a lot of housing counseling and a lot of credit counseling. And the city of Brooklyn Center actually has a home ownership program, and they have agreed to put in $100,000 in that program. And so we're going to start with the first 10 people. And so that each person who successfully goes through that cohort is going to get at least $10,000 to put into to put as down payment for their home. And we're looking for other partnerships. We want to partner with the Land Trust. We've approached some of the lending institutions to partner with us to support these homeowners so that they can put more money in the pot, and all these funds will go towards folks putting it for down payment. And so we want to work with people for whom it's difficult, who cannot go to the bank on their own, to be able to get a mortgage, and require a lot of support and wraparound services and handholding. So that is for home ownership. For health equity, holistic, addressing healthcare holistically, yes, we aim to address the social determinants of health. I think there's enough data to prove that 70% of people's health outcomes depends on the social determinants of health. That is education level, access to healthy housing. We are very committed to our housing work because it is part of health equity as well. A lot of our community members are living in very unhealthy housing, and there's a lot that needs to be done around that. And so our approach to addressing healthcare is through, addressing the social determinants of health, and so being able to move things that we know is going to result into more equitable health outcomes.
Vice Chair Doe, go right ahead with your question.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Nelima. I'm glad to see you here, as a matter of fact, that you're making this presentation. Definitely your work, I believe, is you're celebrating 14 years of existence, right, this week?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, we
So
did.
and I'm very familiar with the work of ACER from the onset. I believe I volunteered sometime way back in those years. So you've come a long way, and I want to applaud you for your work. My question is, have you had any experience at all, partnership or collaboration, or working with this council? And if your answer is yes, what was it like? And basically, how do you view the council now and going forward?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Councilmember Doe. I mean, yes, of course, I have reached out to you. So let's start from there. And, as Chair Hughes said, Chair Hughes has been familiar with ACER for a long time. I've reached out to Chair Hughes. In fact, we just spoke last week and the week before. And, in both her capacity as a chair and also in her position, at North Hennepin Community College. So I've enjoyed a lot of partnership. The previous executive director, Justin Terrell, we did do, a lot of work with Justin Terrell, coming up to the Capitol. And even before the pandemic, I know Justin is someone I would run into him with it, it's at the state Capitol, and you'll say, hey, make sure you stop by my office. What do you need? I mean, especially, 2-3 years ago when we did the yet another iteration of the driver's license campaign, I know we did have a lot of conversations with Justin Terrell when the DED when the DED legislation was passed, and some people were having difficulties, and people in the librarian community were having difficulty in getting their driver's licenses. Justin Terrell, I reached out to Justin, and he did help us in reaching out to the Department of Public Safety. I know I have met Linda, and when she was newly on board, and she extended her a welcome to me and said, hey, reach out to me and stuff like that. It's just been very hectic, although we haven't had some time to sit down and talk, but I've definitely worked with Shakira. So yes, and Jude and Hollis. So absolutely. And I know Flockery, so she's a great addition to the council. So yes, absolutely. We have been able to partner with the council.
There is a question from one of our staff members, and this is going to be the last question that we'll go through, and again, we'll make sure and maybe put your contact information into the chat so that if people have other questions or other concerns of how they can connect with you. And then also, I always ask the question to folks, how can we, help, and how can we partner, even greater than what we possibly have done, thus far. But Theo raises a great question. He says, thanks much for this presentation, Nelima. Can you say more about your policy advocacy work in support of BIPOC business and workforce development? And then he said an example is your engagement with the Alliance's BRC.
Sure. So I will talk about our economic development with BIPOC businesses. So as I said, a lot of our work is centered in the Northwest suburbs, and most of the micro businesses in the Northwest suburbs are, ethnic businesses, BIPOC businesses. We have a lot of, I think they're pretty diverse. There's diversity in the diversity of the businesses. So one of the things that we did, and here's why we started focusing on micro businesses, because early on we were doing work in the Blue Line Extension, and we wanted, as I said before, to prevent the displacement of the businesses. And in having conversations with them through just visiting their businesses, we realized they were facing a lot of challenges. And one of the things we also realized is that, honestly, of the micro businesses, we did not come across a single business who had been able to acquire a loan successfully, whether even it was through a CDFI or a bank to start their businesses. The stories we had where I borrowed from my family member, I borrowed from 3 family members, I refinanced my house, and so on and so forth. And so we realized very quickly that our micro businesses are facing challenges. And so we approached our cities and had conversations with them, and how can they start developing products for micro businesses. When we did further investigation, we found out, and having conversations with the CDFIs, we found out that the guidelines that that are put in place for these loans, prevent micro businesses from being able to achieve them. And in our community, that is most of what we have. We don't even have, these businesses are not small, they are micro businesses. And so we started, that's where we started advocating to say we need products that suit people in our community. So that's what our policy advocacy work looks like. And, that has just grown, especially with the onset of the pandemic. Unfortunately, we could foretell even before the funds came down that people were not going to be able to access these funds because they were not going to qualify because of the regular guidelines. And so we approached the cities and the counties to put money forward for these businesses before the state came in and added more money. In terms of the BRC, is the Business Resource Collective, and it is a collective that was formed during the pandemic, and it is a coalition of the CDFIs. I think there are about 20 CDFIs and community organizations that work across I think the 7-county metro area and probably outside the 7-county metro area. And they came together collectively to make some asks of the administration and the legislature, both during the pandemic, and I think they're going to be putting in together a request, to say that, communities of color have been greatly impacted, and especially our businesses have been greatly impacted by this pandemic. And they have a platform, and I think the link is there. You can look at the link. They have a specific platform about some of the specific requests that they're making, collectively, that they believe those are some of the investments that need to be made in order not to just help businesses of color, especially micro businesses, recover from the pandemic, but also to thrive going forward. Workforce development, we don't do like the traditional workforce development. We like to say our workforce development is in the form of supporting micro businesses, because a lot of the micro businesses in our community, it is people who have replaced their 9-to-5. And also for some people, it has been a source of employment. For example, especially within the immigrant community and the undocumented community, it was some people have started businesses because they could not access employment. And so, whereas we don't do the traditional training, we do partner. We have partners that we partner with who are doing micro businesses. So like, for example, this year, we're going to be supporting some of our micro business owners who train people in the healthcare field to apply for the training grants, that DEED usually offers. So, and then also we do provide technical assistance for a lot of the micro business owners who provide training, especially in the healthcare field, especially in the CNA training field, where we have a lot of folks in our community who have CNA training schools.
Well, Nelima, thank you for being able to come on and share what ACER is doing. We will continue to partner and elevate some things, in reference to what you had spoken about, whether it's the business development, whether it's, kind of economic security, if you will, that really impact our Black and brown individuals, really African descent. And so that's really what we're trying to elevate. So appreciate you. You are welcome to stay on for the remainder of the meeting. And
Absolutely.
if not, I understand.
No, I will stay. Thank you so much. I've read all the comments in the chats. Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation. I think in terms of your question about what could be next, I think one of the things that we're working on, and we're having conversations with other organizations and other people as well. We do know that there's a $7.7 billion surplus, and so we are having conversations on how we can make an ask, a direct ask to the legislature for this session, and we're having conversations. Maybe the goal is to do one big ask, and so we will be reaching out to the council, for support on that. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right.
All right, Keith, you are up.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Hughes and council members. I really appreciated hearing the presentation about ACER, and I've heard some good things about ACER, so it's just marvelous to actually meet virtually or see the presentation, even though just simply in words. I do see a couple of folks, Mr. Crawford, certainly glad to know that you're on. You and I have had conversations, and he is in my hometown of Duluth. That's where I grew up, so I just want to throw a shout out to Duluth.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Part of what I'm going to present to you all folks really has got to be looked through a lens that is probably going to push your envelope of traditionally looking at infrastructure and transportation projects. This is about more than a bridge. And by every means, it's a large proposition and vision. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind as I go through the presentation are these four words: systems, processes, tools, and resources, and how other communities leverage these in a wide range of ways that is virtually invisible to our community, okay? With the exception of those of us that maybe lead organizations in one form or another through various missions. I'm going to start off, let me just tell you a little bit about myself for those that are meeting me for the first time, and I'm excited to be a part of this presentation. So I've been in the Twin Cities 40 years. And in my 40 years being in the Twin Cities area, I've observed and worked within the nonprofit ecosystem. I've worked with government agency, particularly the Department of Transportation. So I know that institution intimately well. Also want to let folks know that I served, and Narita has been a part of this as well, with Everybody In, which really brought attention through the Blue Ribbon Commission in 2012 to racial disparities in the state of Minnesota. And it was really important foundational work that the work that others are pointing to really now can see the extraordinary disparities in the state of Minnesota. The other thing that I think is helpful is not only my experience with the Department of Transportation, but also my work understanding how jurisdictions work, how policies function. So that's why I say systems, processes, tools, and resources is the lens. And if we think about the entirety of the ecosystem, it certainly will kind of reveal, I think, for us all, some important learnings. Forgive me for those that may have seen parts of this presentation in the past in one form or another, but I'm the executive director of Reconnect Rondo. And our real aim is to build a bridge to better, literally, culturally, spiritually, okay? But the biggest thing is really trying to figure out on a state level, on a national level, how to help Minnesota shine brighter. We all know about how Minnesota is both the best and the worst. Best when it comes to affordability, economy, education, quality of life, etc. But we rank 50th in racial disparities, 4th worst place for African Americans. And I don't need to spend too much time on this because I know you all are driven by influencing a wide range of policies to address. For those that are less aware, the community of Rondo rests in what we call the southern route of planning around the freeway. And the southern route is in orange. And the blue outlined area was the community of Rondo from as early as the latter part of the 1900s. But there was a northern route, and that northern route was along Pierce Butler. And because of redlining, banking practices and covenants, this blue area was the only place for African Americans to move and live in St. Paul. And the geographic area was Rice Street, Lexington, University, slightly north of University, and south to Marshall until after the freeway came through, and then it expanded to Selby. It's in the 50s, 80% of the African American community within the city of St. Paul lived within Rondo. Rondo was a growing middle class community. It certainly had pockets yet to develop. But what's most important is this was not only an issue around the Department of Transportation, but it was the city's decision around urban renewal. And urban renewal had as much a devastating impact on the community of Rondo as the Department of Transportation through the Highway Department, then named back in the 50s. Just to give you a little bit of background too, one of the things we wanted to be sure to do was to make a technical case, a business case, a moral case, and a just case. So we conducted a past prosperity study. It's one of the only ones and first ones in the country. What was the quantifiable loss? If we're going to make a business case, we must understand the transactional loss. 700 homes, 300 businesses taken out between 1950 and 1969. 41% home ownership loss in this geographic area. Population loss of 61% in this geographic area. Intergenerational wealth loss of $35 million. And that is a gain of $50,000, which we tracked the sale from an original descendant from the original owner to a descendant, and then out into the marketplace with a gain of $50,000. That 50,000 times 700 homes is how we come up with the 35 million. But if the homes had never been taken, there would have been realized $157 million. Again, those homes took away not only a revenue base for the city, not only a tax base for the county, but also individuals who lost their homes through eminent domain and a wide range of other policies that impacted. But the other thing that I want to really focus in on too is, okay, so what is the effect? And so we needed to quantify the effect. And so when we compare the average median income in Rondo, and that's the geographic area that you see there along the census tract. The
so
northern...
Keith, you still have it on the first slide, so we're not seeing.
Oh, it's not advancing on your end,
no,
huh?
It's not advancing on our end.
All right, hang on just a second, because it sure is advancing on my end. Let me try it again. All right, let's go with it. Let's try one more time.
Maybe try as a slideshow.
How is that?
So we see it, but not there. Okay.
It's showing now.
Now it's showing. I think it.
Okay. So that
There
was the routes, the northern route and the southern route. Well, thank you. I need
you
some
were in your phone. I was trying not to mess you up.
audience participation. You got to have it. So anyways, I've already spoken to the geographic area in blue. The green line that was the northern route, it would have virtually taken out no homes. And then the southern route that was ultimately intentionally decided to go through Rondo. Again, the Department of Transportation and the city of St. Paul both were participants in this. And I know that it's easy to point to MnDOT as the agency that is the dragon, but the city of St. Paul equally participated in this and devastated the Rondo community. So I was talking about just the quantitative analysis. Again, one of the first in the country done. 700 homes, 300 businesses. Again, 48% population or home ownership, 61 population loss, intergenerational wealth loss. That's a snapshot in time, though, of 1980. Okay, the gain was 50,000 to the descendant after the descendant sold forward, and then 157 million unrealized home equity because the homes no longer exist. And we think about the current value of homes in the area today, 225,000 times the 700 homes roughly brings us to that 157 million. But the other thing, like I was mentioning in terms of the earning, if we take the average median income, again, along the census tract here, and just consider the northern pink shaded area, what you have is a $270 million earning gap when comparing Rondo to the average median income of the metropolitan area. It's a devastating picture. When you add the southern tract, the unshaded area, okay, census tract, it increases by another 100 million. Now here's the reality check. 50 of the top CEOs in the state of Minnesota's compensation is equal to 370 million that they earn annually. That is the earning gap of Rondo itself, okay? This is Minnesota nice at its finest presentation. The other thing that I think is important too, in terms of our past prosperity study, is really trying to quantify what is Rondo's scorecard when it comes to different measures, besides just the equity in a home. When we think about the term equity, we don't necessarily translate it or can articulate what that really means. And so what we wanted to do is share that when we're talking about education security, family security, health security, financial security, energy security, etc., the community of Rondo ranks net negative by each of these measures. And so the point of building equity is to ensure that we're able to measure where a community is today, and over time, their gain towards net zero, which is par, and ultimately a gain in each of these areas. If we think about the last 20 years, if I reflect on the last 20 years, the last 30 years in Minnesota, I can tell you I've not observed any scalable change in our community. We've seen incremental illustrations of good things that are going on. But when we talk about statistics and data, there has been no scalable change within Minnesota, and particularly we see noted here for Rondo post the freeway going through. So let me give you just a bit of background so that you understand how our organization emerged and what has happened prior. So we think about 1890, the community of Rondo began to form because they were enclaves of various folks who came through migration or immigration. And then the destruction happened in 1956 to 1968, and I've just spoken a little bit about that. There was a family reunion that was established, or a community reunion that was established called Rondo Days. And with the exception of the last couple of years, Rondo Days has been this process of healing and community connection that has happened for 35 years. But again, it started as a call to those that were disbanded in the African American community to other states, other parts of the state of Minnesota that came together for this reunion. The idea of a cap or a land bridge, or they also call it a stitch, emerged in 2009. And I was really appreciative of the mention of the blue line, okay, as an illustration in the previous presentation. So we have the Central Light Rail Corridor going down University, and the implications of that was that there were no stops planned in Rondo. And so the community gathered and protested that there were no stops. But not only was that an important presentation and pushback of the community, but as the negotiation and as a lawsuit was filed, it demanded that either create the stops and, oh, by the way, replace the land that the federal government took through the Federal Highway Act in the community of Rondo. So again, 2009. There was a formal apology in 2015 by then Mayor Coleman and then Commissioner Charlie Zeller of the Department of Transportation. The commemorative plaza was established, which is on Fisk and Concordia, commemorating not only the apology, but the celebration of Rondo's past, the current diversity within Rondo, and now this vision of a land bridge possibility out there being projected. I came on board just after Reconnect Rondo established. I did serve on the board as one of the founding members, then came on into the leadership role in 2019. And part of that is because of my transportation background and really understanding how to take a project and an idea to realize a path for something that can specifically happen to the benefit of community. We were successful at the legislature in getting 6.2 million, which I'll speak a little bit more about. So the role and the mission of Reconnect Rondo is to lead a restorative movement to revitalize the Rondo community with an asset, a land bridge that connects Rondo and reignites an African-American cultural enterprise district. I want to emphasize that while it's geographically St. Paul, we are talking about African Americans throughout the state. We are talking about how to leverage infrastructure to the benefit of Duluth, infrastructure to the benefit of Rochester, infrastructure investment to the benefit of St. Cloud, and we can go on and on to find geographic locations all throughout the state. By creating an African American cultural enterprise district, the question is, what's the relationship of this district to other African American communities throughout the state? The other thing that I also want to emphasize is that this is a complicated proposition. It's got a lot of layers to it. We've got the legislators, we've got equity organizations within communities, we've got each of the jurisdictions, Met Council, the City of St. Paul, we've got the county, and we've got the Department of Transportation, plus state agencies. Then the question really is we've got residents, and community members, and then descendants as well. But there is a big proposition in front of us because we all know now the alignment that's happening at the federal level in terms of infrastructure investment. And we are the poster child, if you will, of a national movement of how do you take a look at transportation investment that destroyed communities, and how do we create an illustration of what we can use and do to improve. So the feasibility study was the next. These were the 5 feasibility study goals: neighborhood connections, housing affordability, equitable development, public health and green space, as well as community leadership. Through the feasibility study, we had 7 concepts emerge. And when I say concepts, not designs, not decisions, but for the purposes of analysis. To say, if we created 21 acres of new land, placed it over the freeway, what could we do with that and what might be the benefits? To give folks an illustration of what I really mean is this is currently 94. And 94 in essence would be tunneled for 5 to 6 blocks. Now, again, there's no decision on what should go on top. It could be park space, which I believe the feasibility study speaks to in terms of a certain about 13 acres of the 21 acres. Housing can go on top of it. Civic common space, amphitheater, educational institutions, a clinic. I mean, we can use our imagination when we create 21 acres of new land, what might be possible. But this gives people a visual of what we actually mean. And in fact, this is part of the technology tool we'll be using as part of our community engagement activity to aggregate the voice of community. With that in mind, we believe that there must be a phased approach to this work being done. So we are now in pre-planning. And pre-planning kind of fits into these specific buckets: community planning and engagement, assessment and analysis, environmental impacts analysis and evaluation, master planning. Then we take a look at the current ecosystem. As I said, we've got a nonprofit ecosystem that's already responding to community needs. That's not what Reconnect Rondo does. But the question is, how do we amplify the existing ecosystem and help to resource the ecosystem towards greater prosperity across the board? We also are focused in to anti-displacement policies and programs that we think are important. So an environmental scan in this regard is happening. in addition to the city doing an overall wider anti-displacement evaluation, we're doing it for this targeted geographic area. We also have a proposition called restorative development modeling. It's modeling how do you create not only the African American Cultural Enterprise District, but how do you create a circular design, intentionally a circular economy? How do you design intentionally that circular economy in this geographic area and its relationship to downtown, its relationship to the Sears development, its relationship to what's going on in North Minneapolis, its relationship to what's going on in Duluth, just as an illustration. So it's about leveraging an infrastructure project, ensuring a circular nature and an intentional design around economics and the connections, but it's also really taking a look at 21st century vision, addressing renewable energy or climate change matters, etc. The total cost is $560 million, but that's for design, and then the development on top of the structure, $167 million, and then ultimately the bridge infrastructure itself breaking out into $247 million. So we were successful in getting the 6.2 as part of our planning process. So what's the economic opportunity? 576 new housing units. Again, this is the feasibility study. 1,800 new jobs can be created. The question really is, have we prepared the pathways? Also, dealing with business building. Have we created the pathways? How does the current ecosystem support that pathway development from a workforce standpoint and a business development standpoint? Got nonprofit and institutional space of square footage that we're anticipating of 36,000 square feet, retail and office space for boutiques, boutiques run by descendants of Rondo, just as one illustration and possibility. And then we can see how the city can gain 4.2 million annually, and the community overall can grow. And we certainly know that displacement and gentrification are great concerns, and that is always in the forefront of what we're talking about. I'm not going to go through too much in terms of the path, but I just need everyone to know that we've really been intentional about making the business case, the technical case, the moral case, and the just case. We have different audiences to speak to and respond to, and we've done everything necessary to get us to this master planning process. No preliminary design has taken place. No final design has taken place. We are simply in the planning process. We don't know what the timetable is for the project emerging. I have some ideas myself, but nothing definitive at this point. The other thing that I think is really important for me to share with you is our financing model and our financing approach. Carl, I tried to introduce this on the golf course project that was up in Duluth, Inger Tower. And I think that this was one of the reasons why we were the selected developer. However, I don't think the city of Duluth was ready for what we call true community ownership, true community benefit. A restorative model is what we're using. And I developed this model in 2013 that really takes into account that traditional development projects are public-private activities. Very rarely does philanthropy fit into it in terms of program-related investment dollars, or are there ways in which neighborhood and community people can own the development that takes place. So our 4P model allows for the community to be the master planner. It allows for the community to be the master developer or co-developer. This is important because it's different than traditional development that happens in neighborhoods being driven by developers and also driven by community development corporations within neighborhoods, but there still is no direct community ownership link that puts a return back into the hands of community. The other thing that I want to really emphasize is precedence has already been set on what we're talking about. This is, Carl, and I'm sure you can recognize this, the city of Duluth. This is a land bridge that exists, Leif Erikson Park, as you're going up 35W. So we know precedence is set. Minnesota has 10 of these kinds of structures throughout the state. When anyone drives through Lowry Tunnel heading over to North Minneapolis, or from North Minneapolis over to St. Paul, we've got the Lowry Tunnel. That is a form of land bridge. Down below here is Clyde Warren Bridge. It's in Dallas, Texas. What it has is a structure on top here, and that is an open amphitheater. It's got a restaurant here. If you can see my arrow, it is 5.2 acres. So our project is 4 times this size. It has community and neighborhood play space for kids and an open celebration corridor here of land where gatherings, Rondo days can happen, jazz festivals can happen, and along here is where they line up the food trucks. So precedence is set. This is not a new idea except for what we're proposing to go on top of our land bridge here, because most of them are simply park space. I want to emphasize US Bank Stadium and Target Field. I'll start with Target Field. Target Field currently rests over a freeway. A lot of people are unaware. $350 million was invested in Target Field from the state. $90 million was for infrastructure investment. Now think about it, $90 million in a public-private partnership for a private business entity. Public dollars were used for the infrastructure investment. $260 million was used for ballpark construction. What we're trying to do here is illustrate that you should view our project like an economic engine, no different than you view Target Field as an economic engine for a surrounding area. The US Bank Stadium, $348 million was invested. The question that I ask you, the question we should ask ourselves, how did Rondo benefit? I've already given you statistics of where Rondo rests and the Rondo scorecard. There is no way of measuring that direct benefit, and that's why we have to invest in neighborhoods the way that we're proposing being invested in Rondo. I'll just go through a couple of more slides and then I'll field any questions. So Reconnect Rondo, again, on behalf of the community, has set conditions to leverage potentially newly created land over a freeway to reignite an African American cultural enterprise district in Rondo to serve as a catalyst, catalyst for and to community and regional prosperity. We've got a youth council that we're putting in place. We've just hired 8 interns from the high school for recording arts, and they will be helping us with our awareness building campaigns, but we're also helping them to understand and prepping them as advocates and leaders on behalf of the arts community, as well as young people, because this is not about today. This is about 50 years from today, 75 years from today, and it's important. But I highlighted the Rondo Roundtable for an intentional reason, because what we have here is the historic footprint of Rondo, Rice Street to Lexington. That's highlighted in blue dotted line. What you see in blue is a collection of organizations that are called the Rondo Roundtable. And these are historically African American led or African American resourced organizations. What you also see in orange circles are other organizations that we will be pulling together collectively to create this African American cultural enterprise district. We've got to ensure a force field of protection for our community. We must create a prosperity zone. Today, Rondo is simply a neighborhood. It's not a planning district or a planning council and cannot leverage TIF district or other kinds of arts district funding, business district funding, because it does not have that standing. So we propose to put in place here, using the land bridge, an overlay district that allows for the leveraging of the systems, processes, tools, and resources that other communities use, that the African American community specifically is absent in leveraging. And I think it can speak also to greater prosperity for not only African Americans, but any new immigrant community, as we are intentionally tying in the experiences being one cultural destination area, no different than Little Africa, that's along Snelling, or the Little Mekong that the Hmong community has kind of flourished in, or other geographic areas like the east side of St. Paul, where a lot of Latinx are emerging, and the west side. So we see it as a way of really igniting something beyond just simply African American, the African American community and its needs. So we're in a process now where we're building our organization. We're putting in place systems and support in order to get the work done. We've got a technical level of expertise that we've got to put in place. I'm not going to go through the schedule, but this is really what it looks like high level. We're going to be launching our technical team in February. It will take us the next 36 months, 24 to 36 months, to again deal with anti-displacement and creating the overlay district, restorative development modeling, master planning and studies, really coordinating with the city and its infrastructure planning as well. But we just want people to be aware that this is something in motion that's in pre-planning. What we want to be intentional about is, if you can see the black lines, those are community engagement opportunities. What you see in the green lines with the circles, that's where the studies have got to integrate, okay, together, because we've got to make sure that the principles of protecting the community, the principles of ensuring an economic benefit to the community has got to happen. And so the studies have got to all consistently reflect it. I'm just going to give you a quick picture of our technical team that we've put together. It will be led by African American engineers, principally on the engineering side. We've got a few other positions that we've got to put in place. Bjorg van Severson on the very bottom from the Yorth Group. He conducted the past prosperity study and really is expert in the restorative development modeling, circular economy, smart cities technology, regenerative urbanism. But with Della, she's a natural environmental expert in terms of water resource engineering, runoff, plant life, etc. Bill Smith is an urban planner. He also has done and conducted a wide range of technical federal studies that are going to be required. And then Craig Vaughn, as well as a planning person, someone who understands a wide range of transportation processes, he'll be leading as well. And Craig, by the way, is from the Rondo community, which we're really excited about. So with that in mind, we've got only a couple of things we've got left to do. Establish our team, activate the master planning process, look at the financing vehicle, continue to build community awareness, confirm our partnerships not only with the jurisdictions, but the local ecosystem itself, including the council, and then make sure that our eyes are constantly on making sure there are no negative implications as a result of it. This is our basic proposition, and I'll field whatever questions people may have.
No, thank you, Keith. Lots of information. Abderman, go ahead. I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Keith. Really appreciated your presentation. One question I had was that last slide you showed, the fifth point was the anti-displacement strategies. Yeah. I was just really interested if you could kind of expand on that, sure. Specifically for one and two reasons. So near the Rondo neighborhood, I think technically the Liberty Plaza homes are a part of, they're on Arundel, Western and Concordia. Yeah. And so next to them, I've seen a lot of like higher end condos pop up, and then all the way down the street on around the Allianz Field, I've seen developments pop up and new coffee shops and whatnot. And I kind of got the sense that ever since the stadium got to the area that they were looking to bleed that neighborhood into the McAllister, Groveland, and the more affluent areas. And so I kind of wanted to know what like your guys' strategies were mitigating that kind of gentrification and displacement that could possibly be like, because these interest groups, you know, did you guys anticipate any pushback from them and things of that nature?
Yeah, your question is really going to the heart of just about everything. You know, one of the things that's the opportunity for us, the challenge for us, is our communities have been done to so often. constantly in a reactive mode. And that's a little bit of why I started off saying systems, processes, tools, and resources. When you are the expert in how they function, you can put in place those things well in advance. And this project is so far in advance of the system. We are influencing the system, okay? The Department of Transportation is responsible for St. Paul to Minneapolis corridor. That's 15 miles. What we've done is we've carved out a chunk and a segment, right? The Department of Transportation doesn't control it. The city doesn't control it. Mid-Council doesn't control it. Reconnect Rondo is the driving force. So that's first. We're not a private developer, right? But we understand private development. So with that in mind, what I think we have to do is work in concert with the city for a moment. So the city overall is looking at an inclusionary policy for any development that happens. What's the expectation for developers? Because developers have always been the primary beneficiary, community has been secondary or tertiary, right? So it's about really examining those policies. So the city is doing a citywide anti-displacement study. We are in the geographic area doing an anti-displacement study, and there are 4 things that we're doing. The first thing is a study around right of return. Who should be returning back to the area? Who was forced out? Are there descendants? So we're setting up that framework first. The second thing is to ensure that we put in place a community reinvestment fund. Again, keep in mind, Reconnect Rondo and the Rondo community under the financing model, we are the master planners. We are the developers, okay? And it's important because we don't have to be negotiated with for a 10% affordability in a development project, when in fact we can use the revenue that's generated from the development itself that filters back in to mitigate increase of rising taxes, just as an example, because that's one of the major causes, right? Whenever you bring new amenities into a community, everybody wants to move in. But again, the right of return policy mitigates, but we've also got to manage speculation. When we think about the Sears development and the Midway development, Rondo is sandwiched in, okay? And so that community reinvestment fund is intended to resource, again, displacement mitigation. And when we think about gentrification, it's important to recognize whether the land bridge is there or not, gentrification is happening, okay? But do we not want to invite people to be in the area who subscribe to and have an affection with this African-American Cultural Enterprise District? I think we do. So that kind of gentrification is not gentrification of the negative sense, it's gentrification of the positive sense. So it's all about how you present. The third piece that I wanted to talk about is the financing model itself. So again, first, right of return. Second, community reinvestment fund. Third, the financing structure that allows the community to be the master developer and planner, right? And the fourth really is around how do we ensure that we're putting in place those things that are supportive of commercial and resident development. Those resources are going to be so important because business incubation becomes a fundamental piece. So because it's not in the hands of traditional development thinking, okay, and approaches, we can create the kinds of policies and programs because this land doesn't exist right now. So we can establish on this strip of land a way in which it can influence the entirety of the area. So I hope I'm getting at some of the points that you have raised.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate your answer.
Thank you.
So Keith, there's a question from Theo. He said, can you say more about the challenge of creating pathways for community access to careers and jobs and contract and procurement opportunities related to this type of cultural enterprise infrastructure building? And then the second, and it's in the chat. So the second one is, what kinds of things need to be in place?
Right. So I was sharing with a lot of folks, today we do not have one Black engineering surveying company in the state of Minnesota. I just want to let you know, I'm very familiar with the engineering, the architect, and the construction world in Minnesota, okay? Because I manage the construction contracting for DOT as the deputy director, and I also managed all the hiring of the engineering firms that did work in the metropolitan area. Okay, so there's not one. There's not even one Black construction staking company in the state of Minnesota. Knowing that right now, and knowing that this infrastructure project is coming, we need to be creating that pathway. The average age of surveyors is 60. Okay, so if we create that pathway, not only can people in a neighborhood work after being trained from the age of 13, actually, it's only going to require 2 years. And there's really no certification required for people working under a licensed surveyor at all. Starting wage can be between $17 and $22 an hour. That's for someone who's 13 today. When this project happens, they're 18, right? They have an automatic job right outside their door. So it's about creating those pathways, looking at this project and all of the elements of it, from technology to engineering to architecture to water resource engineering and environment, okay, to this idea of occupations around a green economy. When we're talking about construction, we've got constructions on 2 levels. We've got the horizontal, that's the roadway itself and the bridge, if you will. Then you have the development on top of that, okay? So there are 2 different types of skills. Some are interchangeable, some are not. Today, we have maybe 200 BIPOC, 300 BIPOC construction businesses, maybe 30 that are in horizontal. The rest are in vertical, but even in vertical, most of their capacity is very small, okay? So not only do we need to start incubating and building business or resourcing the building of businesses, but I think we're going to need to find unique partnerships in industry in advance to help build industry here. And I think this is such a large proposition, we will need to invite Black-led construction firms, if you will, into Minnesota, okay, to do it the right way, because the current ecosystem, okay, is problematic. Now, I'm not suggesting we don't use and partner with the current ecosystem in terms of the Mortensons or the Ryans or whomever, okay? But I am saying that we must lead. The engineers that I introduced you to are, in fact, the only 4, the only 3, there are only 4 in the state of Minnesota, okay? So again, the marketplace is very small. So I hope I'm getting at the pathways. There's all kinds of ways. We've got Maxfield School, we've got St. Peter Claiborne Educational School, we've got middle school, we've got St. Paul Central. We need to be creating these partnerships and planning the curriculum, okay, to funnel in. So we have to work with our educational ecosystem. And again, Reconnect Rondo doesn't do education, but we've got a collection of folks that do. Reconnect Rondo doesn't do housing affordability, but we've got a collection of folks in the ecosystem that can, right? And we've just got to organize them so that we can create those necessary connections to move forward. I hope that's helpful in getting at your question, Theo. Let's see.
Yeah, he shook his head yes.
Okay, great.
So Keith, is there a way for you to send the slide deck that you presented so that we can distribute that amongst the council members and maybe send it to Shakira and then she can distribute it out?
Yeah, 2 things. We got a pretty strict brand company that we're working with, and you know them, Nika Creative.
Oh yeah.
Y'all know them already. Okay. So yes, we can distribute the presentations, but we've got to be mindful of what's the articulation within that presentation, right? Yeah. So to council members, not a problem, but I think we're really going to manage this a little bit more intentionally. Now, what this does pose an opportunity is an opportunity, and I just appreciate the new hire that you all have, because that's a sharp new hire you all have, but I visualize partnering with some common presentations, some common opportunities, because we've got to build awareness in our community. A lot of people are just simply focused in on the land bridge.
Yeah.
and therefore the pain bodies of transportation emerge, and we don't trust them, right? But when we build awareness and people become aware of what this is really about, it changes the whole disposition. People say, oh, that's what that is about. I'm in. So I think it's going to be really, really important. And I would say, Carl, I'd love to come up to Duluth. You know, I'd love to head down to Rochester, love to head to, you know, St. Cloud, all the other geographic locations that we know we live, okay, and be intentional about our planning and connection to this proposition.
Anytime, Keith, come on down.
Oh, go ahead, Carl.
What's that?
Anytime, come on down. Love to have you.
You mean come on up, right? But y'all got a lot of snow. I just learned that y'all got snow and it got cold, and I've been down south a while.
We got shovels, hats, and gloves. Come on down.
Oh yeah, I'll bring my parker. You know I got a parker and boots.
Look forward to it, my friend.
All right.
So the one question that I had, Keith, and I know you talked about, you know, how could we partner? I'm just wondering, when I saw the, you know, the roundtable for the stakeholders,
yeah,
that may be something for us to consider, you know, having a seat at that table, so that we can elevate it, you know, to the kind of the broader community. You know, that's just one idea. I mean, I think what you have presented, both presentations, I mean, you all presented a wealth of information. Yeah. You know, even kind of breaking down the land bridge and even breaking down, you know, kind of the ecosystem, because you're right, everybody has truly been focused in on just the land bridge itself and not looking at the other facets that surround this project as well. And so I think that could potentially be an area, you know, of interest for us to consider, you know, possibly sitting at the table. And then there could be other opportunities as well.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that I did when I first came on, you know, and you know the work that we all did with everybody in,
yep,
you know, mapping the ecosystem. So I do have what I call areas, topic areas. You know, the roundtable, one of their initial emphasis is creating this world-class destination area, okay, emphasizing history, culture, you know, that type of enterprise. But when we talk about housing, that's another topic issue. When we talk about economic development, that's another topic area. When we talk about or look at programs and educational pathways, that's another topic area. So what we hope to do is demonstrate, similar to the way we're demonstrating in the roundtable, the organization around those similar topics, right? And I do see the council can play a really important role in the umbrella proposition, certainly at an individual table, but the umbrella proposition, given that enterprises surface in a wide range of ways, right? It's more than just business, it's about arts. It's more than just arts, it's about culture and history, etc. So I would really look forward to furthering some conversations around that. And I'll also say one other thing in terms of policy. I've been working a little bit with Ed McDonnell and the group that's over on the east side developing some policy. What I've been really emphasizing is this: how do you use the shiny nickel and the opportunity that we put forward with this Rondo land bridge, and how does the advocacy for African American arts resources tie into this enterprise district that can connect to other African Americans or others around the state? So just looking at it strategically would be important. So there's a wide range of the contracting stuff that I know they have a bill on the table around, and there are several others. So just being intentional about how we talk about it, how we elevate it, how we connect the dots around it as well. And I'll finally say I've just taken on the chairship of the emerged African American CDC. Dorothy Bridges has been really championing this. I know that there are several other organizations that have been about it, but I see that also as a really important piece. And if you haven't had an opportunity to learn more about it, it all ties in, and we just need to pull the drawstring as we strategize at the legislature to kind of amplify. Because I'd love to talk about an arts culture center in Duluth. I'd love to talk about an arts cultural center in Rochester, right? But we've got to connect those dots and not allow geography and also not allow self-interest to be disproportionately undermining of everyone's proposition, because we've got a lot to celebrate here and a lot to lean in on.
Well, thank you, Keith, so much, because I know you could have been doing something else besides being on our call, but it was definitely, you know, worth hearing the information and then being able to allow us to ask some pertinent questions of, you know, how do we lean in and dig in, and then also partner with you all. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda, for also meeting with me a little bit earlier, as well as, you know, Fatima and Theo.
Perfect. So we're going to move on to our agenda item. I don't believe there are any public comments. I just kind of tried to check with Shakira, and there were none. So we're going to bypass that. We did not have any unfinished business. So new business, it will be the Theo show. So we have our legislative priorities and legislative engagement, and that will take us actually to the end of the meeting. So Theo, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you to those presenters. That was really awesome, those two presentations. And hopefully this really, there's definitely some sync and connection between what we're about to discuss next. So I'm going to share my screen so we can go through this. All right. All right, here. All right, so I hope it's viewable and readable. Unfortunately, I cannot see folks.
We can see it.
But,
you're good.
You're good? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So basically, we'll just use the last 20, 25 minutes here to go through the policy agenda that we have developed for 2022. And so basically in the last several months of 2021, we conducted research and outreach activities. We reviewed the outcomes of the 2021 legislative sessions, and we also engaged with community partners and some policy partners about the needs and priorities for 2022. And so the presentation here is basically the outcome of that outreach work. So I mean, I want to flag just two things before we move on to the actual presentation. One is just a unifying sort of community theme or value that comes out of the 5 priority areas that we're gonna be moving with and working on this year. Culturally relevant inputs, meaning that the sort of source, the knowledge source of policy development is rooted in community ideas, and really seeks to address the needs of the community and the voice of the community, and also socially targeted outputs, that the actual policy products, the funding products are really targeted to our specific demographics, to specific areas that we're concentrated in, or to specific organizations and constituents in our community. And I think those two things, in terms of the information that comes out of our outreach, those two sort of combine for what we think of as inclusive, participatory public policy development process. And so for the presentation, pretty straightforward. I'm going to go through each priority area, and I will actually, I would like to yield for questions and maybe a little bit of discussion after I give a brief overview of each area. So the first priority here is on economic security. The main objective we have there is to support legislation and public programs that would agenda and increase public and private investments in African heritage business, employment, and workforce development. And I just want to flag, I mean, particularly in relation to, it's just pointing in relation to the presentations that we just had, that you know, one model for this type of policy issue is the Reconstruction model that comes out of the House Select Committee on Racial Justice, the work of that committee and their partners since 2020. And there's the sort of model of Reconstruction where you have intentional and targeted investments of some of the economic contributions that BIPOC communities have already that they've provided to the Minnesota economy, that you actually reinvest some of those contributions back into the economic growth of those BIPOC communities. And so in the two key recommendations out of this that really can be, you know, that really fall, you know, very consistently in line with some of the ideas that we just heard in those presentations, is that you need to dedicate about $800 million of the estimated $8 billion in annual output of BIPOC businesses for direct investment and finance growth, finance capital, growth industries, new industries, market access, technical resources within BIPOC communities themselves. And also reinvest $200 million of the estimated $200 billion annual output of the BIPOC workforce directly back into BIPOC workforce development. And so that's in the form of dedicated career and jobs pathway programs, upskilling and reskilling initiatives, and holistic approaches to student support from preschool to higher education. And these two key ideas, they're affirmed in a way by the House Ways and Means Committee very recently in the report that committee presented on progress towards racial equity in the, you know, by the House, the racial equity agenda that the House put forward in 2020. So there was a review of what kind of progress the state has made on that, and that report was presented in a meeting February 7th last week. So that's the overarching goal there. I mean, some of the efforts that are related to that, certainly, you know, there's a scale in terms of our personnel capacity and our work capacity and engagement with these issues. But some of the other measures that are related to this are there's certainly some movements right now in the legislative process regarding COVID-19 frontline worker pay, to create a HERO program that would pay 667,000 essential workers at least $1,500 for risking their lives to serve our communities during the pandemic. Mr. Keith Baker, I believe he mentioned this group, the Minnesota Equal Opportunity Partnership, doing very important work, and we supported legislation that they put forward last year. And some of that stuff is being developed, as Keith mentioned, to really, you know, find policy and funding investments that would improve Minnesota's capacity to enforce civil rights and equal opportunity obligations in relation to employment, housing, procurement, and business and cultural enterprise development. Another key policy that there's some discussion around moving forward this year will be the Women Color Opportunity Act. And that is really trying to address funds and technical assistance for girls and women of color to develop business enterprise, increase financial literacy, and also, you know, increase participation in STEM careers and representation in high wage, high demand, non-traditional work opportunities. And another area that I think is actually very important, just, you know, as a cross-sectional issue in terms of our knowledge and research practices, our public knowledge and research practices as a state, is to upgrade African heritage economic data. And so that to provide grants for research and technical support projects to really update and upgrade public data about the economic conditions and contributions of our communities, as well as how we understand the kinds of innovations and strategies that we need to address the challenges that we face. All right, so I am, you know what, I want to ask Linda what she thinks in terms of time, and whether we should have some dialogue about that first. If there are questions, I could take some questions about that first priority area.
Well, I think we only have 20 minutes, so I'm going to defer that question to our chair. Would you prefer for him to ask for questions after each, or would you prefer just at the end so that we don't run out of time? It's your call.
So I would say go through the remainder and then questions at the end. If as you're presenting, and this is for anybody that's on the call, so that you don't lose your question, you can feel free to put it in the chat, and then we'll try and get to that as well. But yeah, I mean, I think because of us being in session, it's really good for us to know, what are the legislative priorities, and then we definitely want to, make sure that we leave time for the two announcements. And it really is about the Day on the Hill and legislative training, but keep going, Theo. I would say go ahead, and then people can put it in the chat.
All right, cool. Very cool. Let me get back to that. All right. So the next section here, I'll zoom through these, is the education equity agenda, and that is to really advocate for policy innovations that would close opportunity gaps by improving, direct access of African heritage students to high quality academic, mental health, and technology resources. And we envision, the process of really improving education opportunity in Minnesota, that it requires innovations in our statewide knowledge, policy, and stakeholder practices, and how we really direct resources to Black students and families, the kinds of resources that they need for success from early childhood to post-secondary preparedness. I want to just flag, there are a few of these policy measures here. I'll just flag some of the top ones there in terms of increasing funding and technical support for culturally relevant education programs that are rooted in the African heritage community and that have been shown to improve education outcomes and family stabilization outcomes in the community. To universalize early learning and family support opportunities, because those are prudent in the short term and they reduce racial disparities in the long term. And there's a key policy regarding non-exclusionary disciplinary practices. The state should find ways to ensure that our kids are still connected to quality learning, and that there are ways for us to build manners and deal with disciplinary problems without detaching our kids or criminalizing them away from the school system. To combat racial disparities in post-secondary preparedness, and that involves the kinds of things that I believe this is very related to the kinds of things that Keith and Nelima were referring to in terms of really building access to quality career pathways, dual credit enrollment programs, rigorous coursework, and other types of career development support structures. I want to just flag, that in this area, we always talk about the achievement gap and the sort of tragedy that's Minnesota, the paradox of Minnesota being the quote unquote progressive place, but then having these types of very difficult and egregious racial disparity gaps. I think some of the part of the work for really addressing these issues is to build our knowledge, our public knowledge and community knowledge around really what the obligations are for the state, in terms of federal and state and local obligations regarding civil rights in these areas. And then also, really getting some concrete data around, particularly in the aftermath or in the context of the pandemic, around disparities in access to digital technology, mental health, and nutritional resources, and also rigorous coursework, and really to find ways to address those disparities. And I will move on to health justice agenda. And this one is to track and support legislative and programming initiatives that respond to the unique public health challenges of African heritage constituents. And our projects in this area focus on community health and policy advocates, really supporting them as they work through improving, as they strive to improve health outcomes for African heritage constituents. And we continue to research and track proposals that advance a holistic public health approach, the kind of approach that Nelima was emphasizing in terms of the social determinants of health being the key, being a crucial part of really, wellness and well-being, and really to take a racial equity lens that addresses issues at the intersection of economy, education, health, housing, and society. And we can follow up regarding some of the measures there, but certainly, investment in culturally based, community-based health organizations that have the expertise and the sort of capital the intellectual capital to really address and are well positioned to address our needs in terms of, particularly in the area of infant and maternal health, to really provide the technical and funding support for those organizations rooted in the community. There's a bill that has been led by Chair Richardson in the House to establish a paid leave program, and that kind of a measure has been shown to be beneficial in terms of improving economic and health outcomes for BIPOC, low-income, and women workers, and also to expand access to Minnesota Care and find other strategies to really lower health costs permanently. And those are some of the areas there. And then we have a public safety agenda, a crucial area for us in our work in 2021. We continue to support investments in public safety practices that would advance human rights, police accountability, and violence prevention in our community and justice systems. We really envision this work that it entails administrative side and also lawmaking side strategies that would really promote basic principles of this decency and trust and respect in our practices and our public safety practices, and also to try to address the specific needs and concerns of our community. So the key, some of the key measures here that I really should flag, a really important one for us this session is the Crown Act, which is to really recognize and prohibit hair discrimination as a form of racial discrimination. So that bill has, we had some success with that bill. The time is racing. I'm not even sure if that was last week or the week before last, but we had some major success in terms of that bill getting passed out of the House Judiciary. And so we are looking forward to getting a floor vote for that bill. We have some really good community partners that we've been working with in terms of the push for the bill. And we're really excited about the kind of broad-based community support that there is out there for that bill. So we welcome your engagement in that work. The other areas here that I want to flag, there's a legislation that would create an Office of Public Safety Innovation to provide grants for community organizations for economic and social support and youth development programming. And this is under the flag of, really building community-based nonviolence or violence prevention infrastructure within our communities. There's the statewide efforts, coalition efforts to really improve human rights protections in our policing standards of conduct, to build it into our data collection, our training systems, the kinds of model policies that we develop for our law enforcement departments, and really to really have some effective direct accountability in police discipline structures. And then another bill that has made some good headway, I believe last week, is the bill to allow local governments to establish a civilian oversight council for law enforcement. And this week we will hear a bill that, and we're in full support of a bill that would establish stricter requirements on the use of no-knock warrants in order to reduce racial and social harms that can be caused by the misuse of that kind of practice. And finally here, the strong communities empowerment agenda. Really, this is really trying to direct attention and resource to the structures and infrastructures that shape daily life and daily labor in our communities. So it's to advocate for legislative and regulatory changes that would strengthen resources for underserved African heritage children and families, and particularly focusing on new fiscal and technical investments in child welfare, housing, and system redesign. I think that some of the work here, our council members are very familiar with the African American Family Preservation Act. We had a wonderful presentation on this by Representative Agbaje and Khalees Houston in January, I believe. And this is an important measure that we need some more engagement to try to bring folks together around the state to really pass this measure. So there'll be more discussion about that. Other areas here, to find, to improve our investments, state and local investment in affordable housing, rental assistance, tenant protections, and really, better and more effective strategies for expanding homeownership and wealth creation in African heritage communities. The kinds of things that deeply implicated in the two previous presentations. Another area that I really want to flag is the matter of inclusive and human-centered system redesign measures. This is the kind of area that is deeply multifaceted in terms of really, connecting with state, regional, and local units of government and the ongoing efforts to develop assets and structures that are sustainable for immigrant inclusion, for poverty reduction, and social support, and to really, try to find ways to support the good work that might be going on in those areas. And finally here, these latter two are really, just value principles that are incredibly important, not just abstract, incredibly important for our day-to-day, to use racial equity lens, civil rights protection lens, to develop governance measures that would improve participation within our electoral redistricting and voting processes in Minnesota, and also to develop and support a community-driven policy engagement and evaluation measures that would improve equity and inclusion of underrepresented populations in local and state government and policymaking processes. Those are two areas that we've been very much engaged with broader community networks in pushing and supporting. So that is the round of it. I welcome feedback, questions, and thoughts either now or follow up by email and calls.
Well, I want to, because Representative Caroline upgraded you. Councilmember Crawford had a question. He says, is there an opportunity to work or collaborate with organizations that are working with opioid recovery? And he said he understands that there's funding available for the next 18 years. And this has also led to many challenges in the communities. And then you had another question you said, Carl?
Yes, Madam Chair. The other question was about the high number of IEPs that our communities of color are handed out in the school system. They are pushing our kids along, in which case I have a 19-year-old young man that a grandmother's raising, and she doesn't know what to do with this young man because he has an IEP and he's unemployable. And that has plagued our communities a lot more than others.
Yes,
yeah. Thank you.
Address that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question, Carl, council member. So I'll have to follow up with you about the second question. With regards to the first one, it just turns out that's we really welcome engaging with you more on that concern in Duluth or elsewhere, because we have a wonderful partner in the Department of Health, MDH, Pearl Evans, who works in the overdose prevention and outreach and policy division of that department, and she has been a long-term partner of CMAH and very much engaged on that issue of equity in substance abuse and recovery policy. So for sure, we and in terms of the funding, the funding opportunities that have been made out there in that area. So for sure, we can follow up and have a discussion about that.
Excellent, thank you.
And then Linda, I know you just typed something in the chat. You can go ahead and just say it.
Oh, I just kind of wanted to echo what Theo was saying, that we've been working with someone who works for an agency who's been directly involved in the group. And so we were trying to actually get a seat for the council with this group. But unfortunately, when it came back from the lieutenant governor, it was like, I can't make that happen. But I was told that there might be an African-American seat. So we can look at that. And then if anyone is interested in working with us in this space, we know it's a hot one. And we know that our Attorney General has been working effortlessly in this space as well. And so we just want to make sure that we address it. So if you're interested, get with either myself or Theo.
Perfect. No, I mean, it's a lot of information. I had typed in the chat quickly. What it should have read is, it would be helpful, as we have committee meetings and there's areas that these really impact our legislative priorities, where we can actually, testify on behalf of the council. So, I mean, just keep that in mind because it is critical. It is needed, sometimes to hear from council members and not just from the council staff. That, if there's areas that we feel like we have somewhat of an expertise, or even if you're not as, experienced with some of the topics. I mean, we do, in the past, we have kind of done a primer, if you will. So we're not going to just put you out there cold turkey. we would kind of prime you to say, here's, how to approach, here's what, the data that you would need to kind of give your, information so that it's fact-based, if you will, and data-based. So that is something to think about. And then also, if there are community organizations that you feel like, hey, we're doing something around this, and I'd love to, be able to testify not only on behalf of my organization, but also on behalf of the council, I would say get with Theo and or Linda on that as well.
Mm-hmm. Madam Chair, just one quick question, quick comment to that is, we will be relaunching the issue groups before the next meeting, and it is our hope that each council member will say, hey, I'm interested in XYZ, and get engaged in that. And Flakami is going to be using that as a community engagement tool, as well as a tool where the council can get involved. And before we go, I'd like to just say that we have started getting some council members engaged. I'd like to thank Councilmember Wayne Doe for presenting at the expungement fair. It was fantastic. And then Councilmember Crawford has gotten engaged in the public safety pieces. And if I'm forgetting someone, but this is an example, these are examples of how the council can get engaged in the work. Yeah. And so I thank you, Madam Chair, for reminding us about even just the whole testifying piece. And we'll make sure that we let you guys know when things are happening so that you can get engaged if you're interested.
Perfect. Thank you again, Theo, for, you all have done some phenomenal work over these last, couple months, and even to see, how our legislative priorities really do align with our two presenters is really good. So hopefully, folks are seeing the direct, correlation to what we do as a council, and really to be that advocate or provide advocacy and advisory to the governor's office, but then also legislature as well. So great work, you all. And look at that, we're just a minute over, but I just want to really quickly, and it's in your packet, but I want to reiterate, next week we will have a legislative training on Wednesday from 4:30 to 6 virtually. And then the other thing, I will be glad when 2023 comes, because hopefully we'll be face to face in the Rotunda. But we will have our Day on the Hill, virtual Day on the Hill next Friday from noon to 1:15. Are there any other quick announcements for the good of the gander? Hearing none. If I can have a motion to adjourn, that would be awesome.
So moved, Crawford.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Second, Mullins.
Look, everybody seconded. I love it.
Everybody ready to go. Everybody ready. Everybody
So
ready
with
to
that,
go.
thank you all so much. Look, I messed up your name. Say it for me one more time.
Abdirman.
Abdirman, thank you. Hopefully this was fruitful for you. We'll try to get a one-on-one just to kind of cover some other aspects to the council as well. But with that, you all have a fabulous night. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Good night.
you. See you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Stay well,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye. Flock of me, if you can stay on, along with the rest of the team.